Okay, so I just literally kicked my kid off the computer at like 8 o'clock at night on a Friday night because I am feeling inspired. And this is completely audiobook's fault and also Aaron's fault. I, for whatever reason, I've gotten into the habit of like listening to like podcasts and mostly podcasts, like when I'm in the middle of doing stuff like cutting up vegetables for a crock pot meal or anything that's kind of like mundane. I'm like, I want something that's I can listen to and is, making my brain think. And so yesterday, this actually started yesterday, I was going to be making a meal where I was cutting up a bunch of celery and a bunch of carrots and a bunch of onions. They were, or no, no, yeah, no celery, just carrots and onions for this chicken. It was like a Asian ginger chicken. It was really good. Um, so I didn't have any podcasts to listen to while I was doing this. So that I decided to browse audiobooks because they have a bunch of titles now that are included in my subscription. So I figured maybe I'll go browse around and see if I can find something interesting and new. And nothing was really catching my eye. And then I scrolled back to the top of the page and I see that I can browse themes. And one of the themes is thought provoking. This is what I'm trying to do. I want something to continue to stimulate my brain. So I hit that button and start scrolling down, and I find this book called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. I'm like, that's a bold and interesting title. Like, and it's written by somebody named Thomas Sowell. And I hadn't, I the name kind of struck a chord, but it wasn't like some name I identified right away with. But I like the title. I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? I listened for a minute and a half, and I'm like, no, thank you. I started, and I think I got through the prologue when I paused it, and I emailed or not emailed, messaged my friend Erin and said, "Have you read this book?" And she said, "Yes, I love Thomas Sowell." And I was like, "Huh." And then I start processing where that name rang a bell, and she had talked about him before. In fact, I have his name in notes from a conversation and her and I had previously. I was like, all right, well, so far I'm my interest is piqued because the prologue is basically him just saying, I take full responsibility for any of the opinions that are derived from the papers. So this book sounds like a compilation of papers, and so far that seems to shake out of papers. So he's basically saying, I if you have a problem with an opinion that is stated in this book in regards to this paper, that's on me completely. And me putting them all together is also on me completely. So this is basically the prologue, which was very interesting as well. So I listened for a little while longer, and I listen while I'm cutting up, and this is a little more mindless. And he's kind of warming up. It's the beginning of the book. And and so I get to then I go and run some errands, and my day goes on. My son gets home. I get off the computer. I was doing some work on the web page earlier today. Like this didn't happen like in a short period of time. I listened to some of it this morning or yesterday morning. I don't remember if I listened to any of it last night. Then I listened to some more of it this evening. And as I'm listening to this evening, um, he he starts talking about how the civil rights movement and the welfare system created a situation, and I don't think he's talking about. He's reading a paper, but this is what this is being discussed. When all of a sudden I have a like complete like, okay, who am I listening to? What's going on here? And the point, I believe, of this paper that I'm listening, this particular part of the book, and it's pretty early on. I think I'm only like 17 minutes into the book. I haven't been able to listen to it for any length of time because it, it, even the prologue made me wonder about who this person was. Um, but he's the point that has been reiterated at this part of the book is that the civil rights movement and the welfare system have prolonged this counterproductive lifestyle that is really southern, like southern kind of mentality and upbringing and normalization that actually was imported from England and the folks that, because he's talking about how like people from different parts of England and Scotland and Ireland and Italy even migrated to different parts of the country. So they brought that their cultures over in a way. So I'm very interested now because I was like, that's an interesting, very different kind of thinking than I particularly have ever had. And so what I generally do with all nonfiction writers, if I'm interested and I don't know much about them, I want to learn more about them. I start searching him up. The the rabbit hole that this opened up for me, and I'm not even I'm at like I'm deciding if I want to jump down this rabbit hole right now. That's where I am. Like I have enough information that makes me want to dive, but I'm not sure that that's a good idea because it feels like it's going to be a huge, ridiculous, crazy hole that's going to make my brain explode. That's how I'm feeling right this minute. Because this guy, the reason, one of the things that actually was interesting is that right before he's kind of saying this, there was some statistics being spit out about like married black women in the 20s versus the 94s, like 1920s versus 1994, and the incredibly, I don't even think it was 20s, I think it was 60s. I'm sorry, it was 1960s where the majority of women were in married relationships with, and stable relationships, and there's like 20 something percent of women who had never been married, and then there was the kind of the buffer in the middle were people who were divorced or widowed, and so it didn't discern between those two. So I don't know if the larger amount was divorced or the larger amount was widowed. I may go and look into that as well, but I don't know. So, but by 1994, the number of women black women. This is he's citing black culture. He's doing it as a point though because it also mirrors statistics that happened in similar. You have to. I haven't listened to enough of the book yet. The idea is that he's giving some statistics that are true right now, and he points to how those kind of line up with some of the areas of Europe that are also incurring this no matter what the race of the people are. So he's definitely not like, this is happening to us because we're black kind of person. So so when I look him up, I notice he has two wives. Like, because the first, like, square on my phone, I'm on my phone right now because my son's on the computer while I'm looking, not right now. Right now I'm on the computer. But when I'm looking up this information originally, I'm on my phone because my son is currently occupying the computer. But I'm inspired. And I notice he has two wives. His first wife he married in 1964, and it looks like she passed away in 1975. Definitely a white woman. And I keep digging, and I keep digging, and I keep digging. And one thing, I don't get too far into my digging. This question's like pretty much like right after I discover, I can't find a picture of the second wife, and she apparently is still alive as far as I can tell. He is still alive. He's 90 years old. um, is I put a question a couple questions in the middle of this, and of the notes I'm taking as I'm doing my research, and I'm like, why, as a political science student, have I never heard of this person? Have I never been exposed to their works? And then I also, kind of the follow question is, why don't I have one of his books in my college book collection that I'm currently reading through? And then it makes me think about my college, my San Jose State, where I was taking the upper division political science classes, and that basically all of my teachers that had a slant that I could discern were liberal, including the one that I cannot remember his name. He was an African American teacher. He was teaching. I'm sorry, about African American politics. So it was you have to take for poli sci, you have to take like an international politics class, and a whole bunch of people told me I would love him. He's great. They love him. He thinks he's awesome. And I went to the dean to get out of his class because um, we, he's the professor who I argued in class about Black Friday, because he said multiple times in one lecture how nothing that's ever discussed or mentioned as black is ever he was being he had said it, and he used such a definitive word. I don't remember the exact word, but it wasn't like he said it once and he said in general. He was pounding it home. He kept saying it. And I finally raised my hand and I said, "What about Black Friday?" And he goes, "What's that?" Because I worked in retail. I was 20. At this point, I'm in my 30s because I was pregnant with Chance at the time. And I said, well, for retail businesses historically, or if actually for any business historically, if you want to be accurate, being in the black is a good thing. It's where you want to be as a successful business. And I said, and in particular, historically, Black Friday is when a vast majority of businesses first cut their profit for the entire year, and everything that they make after that day is their profit for the year. And this is at least this is how I was explained why we call Black Friday Black Friday. And I swear he was fuming at me, because the whole class was like looking at me, and he goes, "That's different. We're not talking about money. We're talking about politics." And I was like, because those two don't go together at all, was what I thought. And I'm like, all right. I think that was my last class. I don't know if it was the same day or the next day that I was on campus and had a free window. I marched into the dean's office of the political science department and said, I absolutely, because it's past the voluntary drop point. I said, I absolutely must be removed from this man's class. He is completely full of malarkey. And I was so infuriated with this exchange, not because we had a difference of opinion, but because he absolutely refused to acknowledge that he was saying something that wasn't true. And I didn't have to come up with another example at all. Like, that was it. So, anyways, it made me think about that. So then I start searching, and I find, so now I'm curious. I'm like, because I don't, as far as I know, have any black philosophers in my book collection. And I don't believe I do. And so I look up on Google, black philosophers. And I think I started with that. I don't even think I said American. I might have said American, but I don't think I did. Maybe I said American, because I only got American looking kind of responses, so I might have put that word in there. And I come up with a list. And I've got, I wrote down a list of 5, but the very last one died in 2013. His name was Roderick D. Bush. I, I'm I don't know anything about these people, but I was curious because he was the most recent person who falls, according to Google, into the category of black philosopher or possibly black American philosopher. And so I do a little digging, and it turns out he's got a couple books. So then I go over to audiobooks and I put in his name, his to see if, because audiobooks has all these obscure weird books that are free for me to use. I put in his name and I get there's no results. Nothing. There's nothing in his um under his name when I do it that way. So then I'm like, okay, let me look up the books. And uh, so Roderick D. Bush's books, the two that look like were published. One, I didn't look up when it was published, but the title was The End of the White World Supremacy, Black International Internationalism, Problems of the Color Line, which I thought that's interesting because they, you know, this happens after I'm kind of run through my memory of the professor that I had an issue with. And then the last book was published that was published with his name. It was written with somebody. It was called Tension in the American Dream, Rhetoric Revere or Reality, which was published after his death in 2014. So, anything that's published after somebody's death is questionable as to how much of that information was really theirs and how much of it is spin, etc. Um, I plug in both the books. I can't find anything on the first book. Audio book does give me an option for the second book though, which I don't know if I'll read these or not. I'd have to buy it. It's not part of my included package. I have no idea what this guy is talking about. I mean, his titles seem to give some indication of what might be, but I don't have like a real, I don't know anything about this guy. So I'm going to check out these other philosophers. And then I started digging into Thomas Sowell more. I've got a video. I've got a cool article. I'm going to watch through them. I was really excited that my brain was that choosing to just maybe explore even a book turned into something where I'm going to have a whole new breadth of knowledge, because Thomas Sowell has 4 dozen books. I mean, he's still alive. His last book was written this year. It's called Charter Schools and Their Enemies. And I was like, well, my daughter did graduate from a charter school, and maybe I should check that out too. He wrote a book in 1984 called Civil Rights. Oh, I already said that one. Oh, his very first book. Where is his very first book? Oh, I looked it up, but I can't remember what it was. But it was I don't know. It was, he's still writing books, and he's been writing them forever. And he's an active voice in the political community that I have never heard of until yesterday. I mean, I'd heard of, but I had no idea of who he really was until yesterday. And now I'm like, I need to figure out more about this dude and what he believes. And I'm mostly curious because if the mainstream media isn't pushing him. Oh, I did do a little more research, and I found this. I found his. You can go to his page. He's got books and articles. Books and articles, and then he's got books on economics. Oh, yeah, because he's actually an economist. That's actually what he's considered, an American economist, if you look him up. Which I was like, not even a philosopher. Which is why he didn't come up in my list of philosophers. He's got books on education, books on ideas and ideology, books on race and ethnicity. He's got a career page. He's got plenty of stuff. I did find a really great quote. I kind of digging in, trying to find pictures of his wife. I found this really great quote that I think really enjoyed, and I don't know when he made it, but it definitely seems to be something that he said. Maybe as late as December 22nd, 2017, I see a Twitter tweet that has a really old picture of him with his name. I'm looking at pictures, but the quote is, "It is usually futile to try to talk facts and analysis to people who are enjoying a sense of moral superiority in their ignorance." I, I, I certainly, my son and I talk regularly about how when your emotions are high, your your ability to be logical is low. And this is something that I believe for a long time. I learned from doing some counseling. Um, Actually, learned this going through counseling with my ex-husband. Uh, you know, it, the idea that when we are emotionally engaged in something, that we have less ability to be rational and logical about it is not new. It's not, it's true. Like when I think about any time that you've gotten emotional and how after you calm down, you thought about your actions and were like, yeah, that might have been, they probably would have handled that differently. That, that didn't help me in any way. Like it, generally for me, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm the only one. Generally for me, when my emotions get complete control over the situation, my reflection on the situation is, yeah, that sucked. I was dumb. Or, God, that I said and did things I totally would never have said or did because I don't actually believe those. Truly, they were a thought. They're in there somewhere, maybe, but they're not. They're they're not how I really actually feel or believe. So that's the. I am on a good rabbit hole hunt. Maybe I'm gonna find me the Queen of Hearts. Who knows? That's what I have to say today, y'all. What do you say? I'm curious if anybody knows or has opinions about Thomas Sowell or if anything that I've said here today. Y'all take it easy. We'll chat soon, I'm sure.